Hello, everyone. This is Jenny Johnson, and this is the final talk of Fall Mold Congress 2020 that was supposed to be in Boulder, Colorado. I am a Coloradoan and was so excited to be able to have this conference in Colorado, but we are still in COVID days and we are doing a virtual conference, which is also fantastic. Thank you, Marcia, for putting this together. Thank you, Dr. Dorninger, for putting this together. And thank you to Dr. Shoemaker for creating this community and this content for us to be sharing. It is a privilege and an honor to be here tonight and to be sharing the power of group coaching in removing obstacles to patient adherence and progress with you. So let's go ahead and get started. As a disclosure, I do want to say that my coaching practice, Simplified Wellness Designs, does offer fee-based group coaching programs that will be shared in this presentation. And by way of personal introduction, I'm not going to say a whole lot. I did share a good amount of my personal story with you in the last two mold congresses in which I presented. And I'm assuming that most of you were there or have heard those talks, but in case you haven't, I will share an abbreviated version of my background and a little bit about who I am, just so that you have an appreciation for where I'm coming from before jumping into our talk. I do have a degree in biology and also a master's degree in physical therapy. I have been a licensed physical therapist with a practice in developmental pediatrics for the last 20 years. More recently, I've become a functional medicine certified health coach, and I'm a national board certified health and wellness coach. I am also a Shoemaker proficiency partner and function as a CERS coach with that training. I am also trained as a RECODE certified brain health coach and provide coaching services in that area as well. I do have a personal journey with both CERS and Alzheimer's disease. And I find it just so fascinating that there's such amazing crossover between these two illnesses. And I happen to fall in the middle of both with susceptibility to environmental illness and to CERS. And our whole family really does. And so both of these areas are so important to me and to all of us. This is a picture of my family. And about 5 years ago, we did not look so well and happy. We were all battling CERS, and there's a story behind that. For all of you patients who happen to be joining us tonight, I am one of you. I have been there and I have suffered and felt terribly, lost quite a bit, and been super confused. And I and my whole family are now on the other side of that. And we're here to offer hope. I think we need a lot of hopeful stories to keep us encouraged. And I do have a hopeful story that I would love to share with you sometime. But our whole family is beyond 100% now, thanks to the Shoemaker Protocol, and thanks also to functional medicine foundations that were so important to our underlying well-being. So without much further ado, I will go ahead and jump into our session outline. So our objectives for our time today are to share what I am seeing in my current coaching groups that led to this topic. I will say that when Dr. Dorninger asked for me to speak at this conference, I asked if he had anything in particular that he wanted me to speak about, and he really asked and wanted me to share about my coaching groups. And he is familiar with the group program that I run called CERS Virtual Community Group. He has some patients who have participated in my group program, and he has actually been a guest expert speaker on the medical side of the Shoemaker Protocol in some of my group programs. And so he has seen firsthand just kind of the ethos, the feeling, the nature of the group and the quality of the group. And he really wanted me to share more about my group, but of course I wanted to make that not an infomercial for my program, but more of something that we can all glean from and perhaps even reproduce and learn from. And so I will be sharing a little bit more about my program that led to this topic about adherence. We will also be defining patient adherence and its importance to clinical outcomes and progress. We'll explore the most common obstacles to patient adherence according to the literature. We will consider how susceptible CERS patients may be specifically to non-adherence. We will explore strategies that CERS practitioners could implement to enhance patient adherence. And I will share some strategies that I've implemented in my CIRS virtual community groups to remove obstacles to patient adherence. And I will share the responses that I've been seeing thus far. Oh, and indeed it takes a village. Sorry, I missed that part there. So to start off, I'm going to explain what I mean by group coaching. And when I use the term group coaching, that is fairly broad. That could mean in-office group support programs or patient education programs. But what I am familiar with and what I provide are virtual community groups, which are 10-week comprehensive group programs. And we meet weekly by Zoom video for 90 minutes. And there are typically between 4 and 8 participants in each group that goes through a 10-week program together. So it's pretty intimate and small. And the 3 core tenets of these CIRS virtual community groups: one, social emotional support. And I really received that importance from talking with Patty Schmidt. And Patty Schmidt has provided social emotional support and group support programs for CIRS patients for quite some time. And since her retirement, I have taken over in attempting to provide those social emotional support groups, yet then also combine it with patient education. And this is something that I know Lori Rossi is so passionate about. And talking with Lori about patient education and the importance of weaving this into support groups is something that I'm very much in agreement with. And so the combination of social emotional support and patient education, as well as the third component, which is patient empowerment, are the 3 basic tenets of my program. And by patient empowerment, I am getting at the idea of tapping into our potential, tapping into our strengths, our values, our vision, our inner and outer resources, cultivating a mindset of hope and possibility rather than a negative illness narrative. So becoming empowered in reason and realistic expectations, yet also in having hope and a sense of grit and determination and personal agency as we navigate CIRS, so that we can actually navigate this well and successfully. The CIRS virtual community groups that I host do include sessions with expert guests. So I myself do not cover the medical piece of the patient education. I am a Shoemaker Proficiency Partner, but I want to leave that up to medical providers. And so I invite a surviving mold medical practitioner for one of our sessions to address the medical side of the protocol. I also invite an IEP from Surviving Mold to be an expert guest in one of our environmental sessions. We also cover a variety of topics on going a little bit deeper into the environmental side of things, and addressing lifestyle and mindset and relationships, grief, loss, and a variety of other topics that I think are so important in overcoming CIRS. So what am I seeing in my CIRS community groups that has brought me to this topic? So for starters, I'm noticing that many CIRS patients struggle with the same things. And these common factors, that I'll call them, really appear to impair their progress. And when I look deeper at these common factors that I'm seeing with my clients, I'm noticing that they are strong correlates of non-adherence, according to the literature about non-adherence. So I see this as a red flag, and I'm curious to see what practitioners are seeing, but I'm wondering if, with awareness of these vulnerabilities, we can be more intentional about playing to our strengths and shoring up our weaknesses so that we can help our patients have enhanced clinical outcomes. Also, there is an unexpected secret ingredient that I have noticed in my groups that is powerful and very replicable. And at the end of the presentation, I will share what that unexpected secret ingredient to patient empowerment and patient success seems to be. So here are some of the most common obstacles, these factors that I'm seeing present in so many patients. Number one is overwhelm. And I'll be sharing soon about this, how this is a primary factor that correlates with non-adherence. When patients have a sense of a performance gap, and this one's listed separately here too, but when there's so much that needs to be done, and then a sense that there's not the capability to be able to get those things done. So that performance gap with responsibilities or expectations. So many patients are particularly overwhelmed with step 1 of the Shoemaker protocol, removing themselves from exposure. And so we'll be getting into that a little bit more. Another common obstacle is financial strain. So regardless of whether patients have a strong high income or a lower income, the financial strain involved with navigating this illness is a huge obstacle. Fatigue, mental and emotional fatigue is so common. We all know this. This is one of the symptoms of SIRS. Yet this is also an illness that requires great endurance and perseverance and a lot of work to actually navigate it, from finding a doctor, driving, maybe hours, even flying perhaps to another state to get in with a doctor, figuring out what to do with one's home and belongings, buying air purifiers, cleaning our stuff, and then managing a supplement and binder protocol and maybe nasal sprays and other things that are very complicated. This is so challenging for our patients who are already just exhausted and mentally foggy. So again, there's a performance gap there. So number 4 is discouragement. And partly this is from the above items, but partly also I believe that our patients have a bit of a hopeless mindset that they can ever overcome this. The road looks so long and the light at the end of the tunnel seems so far for some of our patients that it is hard for them to hold on to hope. And then last but not least, insufficient social emotional support is another common obstacle that so many of my clients express, and that is also associated with non-adherence. So question, do these common challenges put our SIRS patients at risk for non-adherence to treatment? And I've already alluded to the answer to this, but we'll dive in a little bit more here. So when I talk about patient adherence, what exactly do I mean? And for those of you who are at the Fort Lauderdale Mold Congress in 2019, you heard Paula Vetter speak about patient adherence. And she offered a great comparison between the term adherence and compliance. And in essence, these terms are interchangeable, though with some slight differences. Patient adherence can be described as a term to describe the extent to which an individual's behavior corresponds to the health-related recommendations of their healthcare provider. So in other words, is the patient able to do what their provider is asking them to do? Compliance suggests perhaps a rote obedience, and adherence suggests something more of a desire, an understanding, a buy-in of the treatment plan, and following through because they want to, they believe in it, they understand it. And adherence even suggests a stickiness. So they're going to stick with it because they get it and they are part of it, rather than just out of blind obedience. So what does adherence have to do with clinical outcomes? Why is it even important? I would assume that this is obvious, but in case it's not, I will posit here that no matter how knowledgeable the practitioner, no matter how evidence-based the protocol, and no matter how perfect the treatment plan, they will not produce desired results unless the patient can follow through. So with that, let's explore the factors that have the strongest correlation with patient adherence and progress. We want our patients to look like the fellow on the right by the end of our time with them, and not stuck on confusion and overwhelm and where is the light at the end of the tunnel suggested by the picture on the left. So we're going to look at the literature to explore what it has to say about factors correlated with adherence. And I found a really fantastic literature review that was written up by Jin et al. In 2008. And this group of researchers explored 2,095 articles that were written about adherence, and they distilled those 2,095 articles down to 102 that met their inclusion criteria to explore the common factors that are strongly correlated with adherence or non-adherence. And so they compiled the factors that were not equivocal and that across the board were highly suggestive of either adherence or non-adherence. There were many that were equivocal, such as marital status, educational level, and age. Some of these things, actually, some research said some things, and other research yielded different results based on kind of the nature of the research and the parameters involved. But there were a large handful of factors that across the board were very consistent. And those are the ones that I'm going to present to you now. Okay, so the greatest obstacles to adherence is what we're going to start with. And I call these the hard obstacles. Actually, it was the research article that labeled these hard, meaning they are measurable. So number one, a longer treatment duration typically yields patient burnout. And what they see in the research is about a 10% drop in compliance every 3 months that treatment is extended. Now, this is for a semi-chronic illness. So an illness or treatment that may last for 6 to 12 months to maybe a couple of years. Not a lifelong treatment, but not also an acute illness treatment, but kind of a semi-chronic illness, which is where I believe SIRS falls. So I think this is interesting for our SIRS patients. That if we can, well, we'll get into this a little bit later, but just keeping in mind that the longer we extend a patient's treatment, the greater the likelihood that their compliance is going to begin to drop. Okay, so number two, the greater the number of medication dosages per day, the greater the obstacle to adherence. So in other words, if a patient has to take a medication 4 times a day compared to 1 time a day, they are much more likely to drop off. So compliance rates for a 1 time a day dosage is at about 80% average for patients, compared to a 30% compliance rate when we're asking patients to take something 4 times a day. And I think we all know why that could be significant for our SIRS patients. So another obstacle to adherence is greater treatment complexity. And this can mean a variety of things, but when there are lifestyle modifications involved, when either getting labs is difficult, when accessing treatment is difficult, when the route the route of administration of a medication is uncomfortable or difficult, when there are many factors that are involved that are slightly more difficult or challenging to access and to comply with, then we see adherence or compliance go down. I mentioned this already. When there's lifestyle change that is required, we see a higher degree of non-adherence. So again, looking at our SIRS patients and the lifestyle changes that we're asking them to make with removing themselves from exposure primarily, this might mean not going to work or not going to school or finding a different job or having to have difficult conversations with perhaps their boss or their teacher, their school administrators. The lifestyle changes within their very own home of pursuing a remediation or maybe having to get rid of belongings, clean belongings, buy air purifiers, have inspectors come into their home. Not to mention sometimes following special diets or having to mind their sleep and manage their exercise differently. These are all significant lifestyle changes for our patients. And I think this puts us in the high treatment complexity category. When there are no written instructions, it places patients in a position to to be challenged to comply. The treatment cost to income ratio, when this is high, so when the treatment cost is much higher than someone's availability of funding, then of course this is going to make adherence more challenging. Minimal symptoms. So when patients don't feel particularly susceptible to an illness and its consequences, they tend to have a more challenging time adhering. I think with most of our THRS patients, this is not an issue. Most of our patients do feel susceptible to the illness and are very motivated to overcome their symptoms. For those of you who are doing early detection SIRS or looking perhaps for even kind of pre-SIRS, screening patients for their SIRS susceptibility, this could be challenging if they don't have full-blown, they maybe don't meet diagnostic criteria for full SIRS yet, but you can tell that they are vulnerable and maybe on their way to that. But if they don't feel particularly poorly and they don't really understand their susceptibility to this illness, that could be a great obstacle to non-adherence to the full protocol. And I'm sure some of you are running into that. Also, when symptoms are slow to respond to treatment, this is challenging to stick with the treatment when folks aren't seeing the progress as quickly and as strongly as they would like to. So now we're going to address the obstacles to adherence that are softer, and these might be more psychosocial, things that might not be measurable, yet are just as highly correlative with non-adherence, so we still need to pay attention to these. When patients have negative beliefs and attitudes about the treatment potential, or if they demonstrate hopelessness, this has an extremely high correlation with non-adherence. When patients have a low sense of personal agency, they are very susceptible to non-adherence. And I think this is obvious, but I'll just say when patients feel that they aren't in control of their outcomes, whether this is for religious reasons or just plain old hopelessness, or they just think that the mountain is too high and they don't have what it takes to do it, or maybe their spouse isn't on board, or they know they don't have the support, they know they don't have the finances, they know they don't have the ability to do this. They think it's not in their power and that perhaps this just is their lot, and what's the point? So for folks who fall in that category, moving through the challenging steps involved in this protocol, especially step 1, can be extremely challenging. Too little or too much patient education. I thought this one was really interesting because I would have thought that more is better when it comes to patient education, but there's actually a kind of a sweet spot. They call this an inverted U, so really a kind of a funky N shape perhaps, where not enough patient information or patient education tends to lead to non-adherence because they don't understand what they're supposed to do, why they're even doing it, what the consequences of not doing it might be, what the next step is going to be. They don't feel empowered with enough information to really understand the point behind it all. But if a patient has too much information, this could lead to the performance gap that we have discussed before, where they start to get this glazed eyes. Oh no, I don't know if I've got what it takes to do all of this. Now that I really understand where things are headed and what's going to be required of me, I'm out. I just don't know if I can do it. So if they sense that they're going to be unable to comply with all aspects of the protocol, the more they understand it, then that can be a detriment. So the just right amount of education and the just in time amount of patient education is really ideal. And I call this curated patient education, because that just right amount and just right timing can really be different for patient to patient. One person might want to know a whole lot up front and feel really empowered and excited to be fully prepared, whereas patient B might want to know just enough to do the step that they're on, and they really need to reduce their overwhelm by only knowing, what they need to know for that week or maybe for that month, and they'll cross the next bridge when they come to it. So when a patient does not trust their practitioner, or when they don't have good rapport with their practitioner, this can really be create susceptibility to non-adherence. This one I thought was really interesting, and I think it's obvious that if they don't trust their practitioner, they're not going to be inclined to follow their instructions, especially if the instructions are expensive or challenging, difficult, uncomfortable, not widely understood by the public and maybe by their support system. But if they trust their practitioner, and if they feel supported by their practitioner, they feel that their practitioner sees them and understands them, is empathetic with their situation, and is a good communicator with them, that does so much in improving their adherence. It's just amazing. So it's just not one to downplay. This one has a lot of power. Similarly, poor communication from their practitioner about their illness, treatment plan, and expectations. This is similar to patient education, but a little bit different in that it's focused on the treatment plan specifically. So perhaps a patient has read a book, or they're well-versed from their own research, but if the practitioner is not clearly outlining the steps that they want their patient to take this week or this month or for this season, and the patient leaves an appointment feeling a little bit confused about what exactly they're supposed to do, and they didn't feel like it was communicated well or clearly, then they're probably not going to adhere, or they're going to get frustrated. And that can really be an obstacle to adherence. Poor patient memory. Oh, this is one that we may not have a lot of control over, though we know that with treatment, their memory can improve. But when patients are forgetful, then of course, they may not remember the instructions that you tell them, and then they may not remember in the day how to implement them. They might remember, in general, I'm supposed to take my cholestyramine 3 times a day, but when noon comes and goes, they didn't remember in the moment. So if they have memory issues, complying day to day may require some external supports. Time commitment to availability ratio. I also call this the energy required to energy available ratio for our SIRS patients. So it's not always that people who are better educated and maybe have higher employment do better with adherence, because often they have less availability than someone perhaps who is retired or someone who's on disability. And this is all that they are doing, and they may be better able to comply because they are 100% available and focused for their treatment alone. And maybe they're not also working, maybe they're not also raising a family. So there is a balance here between the commitment that's expected and the availability of the patient. And this is something that we can tweak once we realize that this is an issue. Insufficient social emotional support. Now, this is for a variety of reasons, according to the literature, but partly just for the soft side of feeling not alone, and of feeling validated and supported and encouraged by loved ones, but also having some practical support from people who understand, and people who care about you, is going to enhance somebody's ability to adhere. And then last but not least, depression, anxiety, fear, or anger about their illness. So depression and anxiety may be standalone mental health conditions that a patient might be undergoing. But some people acquire these additional diagnoses and symptoms on top of SIRS. And when we have SIRS in conjunction with these negative emotions, it can really have an impact on a patient's adherence. So I want to bring back out this slide from my previous presentation. Actually, I presented this in my previous 2 presentations because I think it's so powerful. But about a year ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, I did a survey of the SIRS surviving mold providers, and 23 providers got back to me with their input related to the provider challenges, the challenges that practitioners are facing in treating CIRS patients, the #1 rated challenge was psychosocial factors such as poor adherence, unsupportive relationships, financial strain, emotional stress, poor coping strategies, decreased self-efficacy, a history of trauma, fear, or hopelessness. Wow. And then #2, guiding patients in securing a clean environment is challenging. I think this is addressing or attributing to maybe the treatment complexity and overwhelm. Patients do not have accurate information. This is connected with our patient education component. Patients have unrealistic expectations for their recovery. Obtaining reliable labs is challenging. The patient-provider relationship is strained due to trust issues and poor treatment from previous providers. And patients require more time and attention than what I can reasonably handle. The reason why I highlighted some of these in red are these are the challenges that are coming straight from the mouths of CIRS providers about CIRS patients and CIRS care. And look how many of these, the highlighted ones in red in particular, are the very factors that we just discussed that are related to non-adherence. Similarly, these are the CIRS patient challenges. #1, financial demands of navigating CIRS. So the the cost to income ratio is a significant correlate of non-adherence. And this is #1, is financial issues. And then all these other issues, all these other challenges that are highlighted in red that are all correlated with overwhelm, patient education, social emotional support, and emotions and beliefs and hope and hopelessness. So I hope you can see here that that perhaps the CIRS community, the CIRS population, is at great risk for being susceptible to non-adherence. The most common challenges we face are the unequivocal obstacles, according to the literature, that are related to non-adherence. So with that, what can we do to enhance patient adherence so that we can all enjoy the clinical outcomes we so desire? So we're going to start with some practitioner considerations. Okay, so #1, this is in your wheelhouse, guys. Maintain good rapport and supportive clinical environment. So remembering to use eye contact instead of, focusing on the patient's chart or maybe your computer where you're documenting, but remembering that eye contact actually helps the patient's oxytocin levels increase. And when oxytocin levels increase, we feel a sense of connection and empathy and positivity and warmth that puts our body in a parasympathetic state in which we can receive the information. And when we are in this state of good rapport, we have an improved chance of adhering to the treatment protocol. If you are not currently providing clear written instructions, that is something that you can do that can directly impact their adherence. Have a staff member call patients between appointments to ensure follow-through and navigate obstacles or misunderstandings if they're occurring. Offer curated patient education, again, aiming to not create unnecessary overwhelm with too much information all at once, and then creating that performance gap, but that just right, just in time amount of patient education. Consider controlling costs when possible to best match patients' resources. So if you can pay attention to that the cost to income ratio, and keep that as low as possible, that is going to actually be medicine for your patients. They're going to adhere to the whole treatment protocol better if we can keep the finances reasonable for our patients. So when possible, minimizing the complexity of your treatment plan. So for as amazing and comprehensive and personalized as it may sound, when practitioners add in numerous personalized suggestions and recommendations to their clients or their patient's treatment plan, this tends to lead to shutdown and overwhelm when patients feel that it's just too much to organize and just too much to do. If the plan were simpler and minimized, at least in the beginning, to just focus on a few things, then they likely will not throw up their hands, and they likely will comply better, and perhaps ultimately be able to tolerate more and more additional personalized aspects of a treatment. But starting simple and slow can be a real key here. Again, minimizing the duration of the patient treatment plan as possible to control patient burnout. So when a patient comes to you, the clock starts ticking, and just know that every 3 months that their time with you goes by, their burnout starts to kick in, and their fatigue and their 10% decline in non-adherence may start to kick in. So if you can get things going quickly and help them stay on track with the essentials of the protocol immediately and effectively, and minimize the overall duration of their treatment plan, they will likely have more success sticking with it. Managing side effects of treatment. I think I forgot to mention this in the obstacles to adherence, but when patients have strong side effects to treatment, this is going to enhance their non-adherence. So if patients are having side effects, pay attention to these, because if they're feeling poorly on treatment rather than better, this is going to enhance their ability or enhance their likelihood of dropping out. Consider providing group or emotional support programs for your patients, or refer them to a mental health provider, knowing how important this component is. And last but not least, offer hope. Remember to share success stories with your patients, whether you're sharing them in your office, appointment with them verbally, or perhaps have a graduate of your SIRS treatment program lead a support group, or reach out and call patients, or maybe write up a patient testimonial that you send out in an email or have on your website. But reminding your patients early on and throughout the protocol that treatment does work, that there are recovered patients out there, and that they can be one of them. This is really, really important. Holding on to hope is so important to sticking with the protocol. So before we close, I want to share how I am using this information that I've learned about the SIRS susceptibility to non-adherence to tweak what I'm already doing in my SIRS virtual community groups to enhance the possibility that our patients will succeed and stick with the protocol and see the results that they are coming here for. So in terms of this obstacle, too little or too much patient education, one of the things that I am doing is I am curating the patient educational material that I offer to my groups much more. At the beginning, I thought that more was better, and I was throwing a ton of information at my clients in PowerPoint presentations during our sessions together, and then peppering them with more resources throughout the week, and then having a Facebook group with even more resources. Just again, thought more is better. And when I learned that this was actually overwhelming my patients rather than helping them feel empowered and creating actually a performance gap, rather than what I thought rather than empowering them with information, it was creating a performance gap. And so what I now do is I take the pulse of each group at the beginning. I actually take a survey and ask them what they most want out of the program, what they most want to learn, and whether the social emotional connection side is most important to them, or the patient education side is most important to them. And then I curate, I customize my program to each group that goes through. And there's some that want a whole lot of information, and more is better, and that's great. For those who really want to spend more time in social emotional connection and sharing stories, I send links to some information so that they have it, and I send them recordings or maybe PowerPoint presentations to them separately so that they can have the information, but I don't overwhelm them quite so much. Here is another obstacle that is correlated with non-adherence: greater treatment complexity, overwhelm, and a performance gap. So again, this is one that I see a lot in my patients. The number one phrase or descriptor that my patients, that my clients use in my group programs when they're sharing at the beginning of each session, and we ask how everyone's feeling, overwhelm is the term that is definitely the most common in all of my clients. So I'm paying attention to that. I've started to offer some practical support tools and resources in my groups for minimizing overwhelm. So we actually talk about how to organize our to-do lists, how to create priorities out of our goals, how to take maybe a long-term goal, turn it into a short-term goal with weekly action steps, and then figure out how we're actually going to prioritize those action steps and get them done. I call this chunking, but this is something that I now teach in the program rather than just giving them a bunch of information without the tools for navigating it and organizing it into their actual day. I also teach clients how to track their symptoms and also how to manage their stress in real time. So every session, I teach my clients a different stress management technique. And by the end, they have 10 to 12 different techniques that they have learned that they can then employ in their everyday when they're anxious, overwhelmed, stressed. They've learned a variety of things, including heart math and breathing techniques, visualization, different kinds of mind-body strategies for coming into the center, into the present moment, for centering ourselves so that we can organize our to-do list and get things done. In addition, because so much of the overwhelm of my patients seems to be linked to step one of the protocol and all of the considerations that are so important yet overwhelming and confusing for so many, I have actually designed a separate group program just for step one, and I call it Environmental Foundations. And this will be less about social emotional support and more about equipping people to understand why having a safe foundation is so critical, and what a safe foundation even means, or a home environment, a work environment that is supportive to their healing. How to determine if their home or their work environment is supportive of their health or not, and then all the considerations that might come next. So what to look for in an inspector or a remediator, what to expect with a home remediation, and when moving, sometimes makes more sense than remediation. How to plan a mold move, whether you're looking at a rental or a purchase, how to clean our belongings and how to know if we need to clean our belongings, and putting people in touch with the resources that are available to them already, such as the CSRS House Hunting Guide, the Mold Propensity Index, IEP Radio, AeroSolver, and the Surviving Mold IEPs, who do virtual, in addition to boots on the ground inspections and remediations, and can really be an amazing asset to our patients. So many that I come in contact with aren't aware of some of these resources or these professionals. And so putting people in touch with this information, with the resources, and with the professionals who can help them the best is what that program is about. In terms of insufficient social emotional support being such a great obstacle to non-adherence, this is something that I've really started allowing more time for in my groups. So again, instead of just going, prioritizing the patient education piece, I am allotting more time for catching up with each other, sharing our updates, sharing our stories, encouraging one another, and working on some of the stress management techniques that I already mentioned. I also am offering opportunities for my group participants to stay in touch with each other, not just during the program through a Facebook group, but once the program ends, they can opt into my private Facebook group that does include monthly Zoom gatherings, so they can stay in touch with their new best friends that they've made in their community group. I have noticed that my group participants get really tight with each other, and then when it's over, after 10 to 12 weeks, it's kind of sad. And so offering them a way to stay in community and to continuing encouraging each other within a facilitated and safe and positive environment of my private Facebook group is another modification that I've made to shore up this vulnerability here of insufficient social emotional support. So here's another obstacle. Patients have negative beliefs and attitude about their treatment potential, and they demonstrate hopelessness. I would say this is fairly common. I do have a lot of patients who are just worn out. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, or they think it's too far away. They think, am I ever going to be able to do this? I'm the only one I know going through this. And I just don't know if it's ever going to go anywhere. I've been sick for so long, and maybe I just need to accept it. And while some of those things have some merit and have some truth to them, I love to share success stories of my own and of other clients of mine. And I love to cultivate positive language in my groups and a positive mindset that they can each carry with them throughout the day and after the program. So we work on illness narratives a lot, and we have a session about navigating grief and loss and suffering and managing unsupportive relationships so that perhaps we can change our narrative, change our attitude, and change our beliefs about our treatment. The low sense of personal agency. This is another one that I address in my group indirectly and directly. But I have my clients in our group actually take a strengths assessment called the VIA Character Strengths, the Values and Action Character Strengths Assessment, which is free and online. And we spend one of our sessions talking about how our character strengths can be used to overcome challenges. And I remind folks that yes, while they are going through a tough time and their challenges are very real, and there are some things that are maybe wrong in their lives right now, there are also things that are right. And there are also things that they have going well within them that can be resources and assets for getting well. And so we talk a lot about using our character strengths, identifying with our values and our visions, resources, previous successes and accomplishments, so that we can develop that sense of personal agency and hope for getting well. So another obstacle is depression, anxiety, fear, or anger about their illness. And one of the ways, or several of the ways that I address this vulnerability in my CIRS virtual community group is we actually have discussions and personal activities for navigating difficult emotions such as grief, loss, and anger. I also teach practical stress management tools for dealing with anxiety in the moment, or for overcoming fear or anger in the moment, and balancing our heart rate variability, actually increasing our heart rate variability, maybe acquiring a sympathetic state with various mind-body practices and stress management tools. I also teach my patients about potential limbic dysfunction and some of the resources available to them if they feel that this category may be contributing to their chronic fear or anxiety about their illness, and adding insult to injury to what's already there. The treatment cost to income ratio. We've talked about this one a little bit, but I've really paid attention to what I'm hearing from my patients, that they are either unable to pay for the treatment that they want, or they are paying for it, but they are really afraid about what it's doing to their financial portfolio. And this is creating additional anxiety and stress and marital problems on top of the illness. So this is a very real issue for a huge number of our patients. So what I have done is I have actually added an additional session to my group program to invite in a financial services professional that I have begun to partner with, who, excuse me, can offer fiduciary services to anybody, but focusing specifically on folks who are navigating an illness that is expensive and is looking for ways to perhaps creatively finance a remediation, or tap into maybe resources they weren't aware of, such as health savings accounts, or different health insurance programs that may pay better for the services that they're looking for, and get creative in general about their, whether it's their asset management or about their budget, or about creative loans for healthcare and for remediation. And also providing advice on homeowners insurance, how to optimize their homeowners insurance to minimize that vulnerability in the future, what kind of riders might be available for water damage that they don't currently have, that they could add to their policy, talk to their agent about adding to their policy in the case of a future water damage event. So, so really an exciting offering that I am now able to hand to my clients is this financial support service and financial coaching through a partner that I have to address this significant need. So I told you that I would share the responses that I am getting as I have modified my program, and I am asking patients after the program to provide me with their feedback about what aspects of the program they found most helpful and beneficial. And I'm not going to read through all of these in the interest of time, but what I will share with you as a take-home point, now this is just a sampling, but in just about every patient testimony that I receive, the secret ingredient that I mentioned or that I alluded to before is something that is very replicable and does not depend upon my program or my expertise, but is something that all of you can do in your practices, either yourself or with somebody facilitating this. And the unexpected secret ingredient is solidarity. So it takes a village for us as providers and IEPs and coaches to serve our clients and to share data and research and ideas. But even for our patients, it takes a village. Most of our patients going through SIRS treatment are the only ones they know who are going through SIRS treatment. They feel alone, they feel crazy, and they are really, really hungry for common humanity. They are seeking it in Facebook groups, and I will share with you that most of the Facebook groups for folks with biotoxin illness are probably contributing more to their stress and overwhelm and misinformation and hopelessness and negative attitudes than removing those obstacles. They tend to be a fear-based, negative community of people who are all struggling mightily and trying to support each other, but in a way that can do more harm than good. So positive, encouraging solidarity amongst patients is something that perhaps everybody, all of us, can facilitate for our clients, for our patients. So whether you start to offer maybe a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that you invite your patients to join, and maybe you have a coach, maybe you yourself facilitate the group, maybe somebody in your office that you trust to facilitate that group and maintain high quality content and a supportive, positive environment. This could be a way for your patients to voluntarily surpass HIPAA requirements and want to be part of a quality community. They can join my community. You can send them my way for my program and my community, but you can do this on your own in your own office. You could also, I don't know if you can do this now with COVID, but hosting live support groups in your office, say, monthly meetups for all your SIRS patients to get together and maybe share a snack and share stories. Maybe you share a topic that would be relevant to all your SIRS patients, or maybe it's just casual. Maybe it's a little bit of both. But think about ways that you all could cultivate solidarity in your practices, because this is a secret ingredient that I was not aware of when I developed my program. And now that I am, my job is so easy. All I have to do is create the community, and the patients do the rest. The patients are hungry for connection with one another. And if we can facilitate that and cultivate that more, I think that our overall ethos of our patient community is going to improve, and we're going to see improved clinical outcomes because perhaps of improved, enhanced illness narrative, emotional social emotional connection, mindset, positivity, hope, and feeling connection and collaboration with others. So don't forget that that is an important ingredient that we can all cultivate. Thank you all for being here, for participating in this conference and in this talk. And this is a picture of what we would be doing now, moving into our social hour if COVID wasn't in play, but we'll do that virtually. I'm looking forward to visiting with all of you. And I will be available for about 5 minutes worth of questions. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to contact me, I would love to be in contact with any of you who'd like to discuss any of this in further detail.